Hello and welcome. This is the latest episode of the Fitness Reborn podcast. My name is Sean from Renaissance Fitness Personal Training, where we put movement ahead of workouts. And my guest this morning is Allie Cass. Allie is a functional health and fitness coach, and she has an emphasis on gut health, on hormones, metabolic health, and fat loss. So she kind of encompasses a whole lot right there. And today she's going to talk to us about everything she does. And I think she works specifically with high-achieving, high-performing women, if I got that correctly from her website. Okay, she's nodding, so it seems like I'm in the right direction. All right. And Allie, good morning. Thanks for coming on.
Good morning. Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, not a problem. So starting out with, on every guest, on every episode, I like to kind of have a context for people to kind of know where we're coming from. So I like to ask the guests what their story is. I know things about you, but probably no one else listening to this really does. So Allie Cass, like, who are you? What do you do? And how did we get here today?
Ooh, I love that question. Who are you? I feel like that's like the inevitable lifelong question, right? Who am I?
Right. Exactly.
My name is Allie. I'm a functional health and fitness coach, and I've been in the industry for almost 8 years now. I grew up as an athlete. So for me, physical fitness, competition, sports, those were all things that were very much ingrained in me at a young age, and things that I very much value. I realized when I went to college, I played Division III basketball, fell out of love with it, and decided to quit and pivot to whatever was next for me. And in that process, I realized how unhealthy I was. No one had ever taught me how to nourish my body through food, using movement as sort of a medicine as opposed to using it as a means of competition. And no one ever talked to me or any of my friends about what it looked like to live a healthy lifestyle. I quickly found myself overweight, tired all the time, just not feeling my best. And I knew that something needed to shift. Fast forward about a year after this, I graduated college. I was there for about 3 years. And my mother was diagnosed with stage 3 brain cancer. So I moved across the country and became one of her primary caregivers along with my father. So I still, feeling not my best. And then kind of going through this process with her was really eye-opening to me. And I started to ask the question of what makes someone truly healthy. My mom growing up was never someone that was sick. She wasn't on a lot of medication. She wasn't overweight. And so when we got this diagnosis, I was like, why? Somebody told me why. And of course, no one in the medical community could answer that question for me. And as a coping mechanism, I just started to do a lot of my own research and started looking at things like nutrition, environmental health, toxins, even as far as how our mindset, our beliefs, and our inability to let go of, past traumas or things that have happened to us in our life, how that affects us at a cellular level. And I just became obsessed with holistic health and holistic fitness. So after my mom passed, again, still kind of finding myself in this place where I was overweight, tired all the time, feeling very depressed, just not feeling like my best self. And so I hired my first health and fitness coach, and she absolutely transformed my life. She convinced me to compete in bodybuilding, which was I thought it was a terrible idea at the time. I was like, I do not want to stand on stage in front of people. This looks terrifying. But the athlete in me really wanted something to work toward. So it served me really well through that period of my life. And it kind of helped me get back on track with my own health and with my own fitness. I competed for about 2 years. And, I saw kind of the flip side of the coin, right? Where we go from being rather unhealthy, not having very great lifestyle habits, to then being like uber obsessed with health and obsessed with all the things. And that turned out to not be very healthy for me either from a mentality perspective. So after my second show, I decided to pivot and focus on what I wanted to do with my life. And that was help other women kind of experience the transformation that I had gone through. Because I realized that for most people, it's not rocket science, but the information, it's out there now much more than it was back then, but there's so much conflicting information. There's so much confusion. There's so much noise. And the reality is that, most people can make a lot of progress with just mastering the foundations over and over again. And so I became very passionate about helping other women because I could see it in my friend groups, my family, people that I would interact with on a day-to-day basis. I'm like, we are not healthy. We're not, feeling our best. We're not showing up in our best capacity. And I'm a big believer that life is very short. And so I love to use health and fitness as a tool to help people become their best self so they can live their life the way that they want to, because we're not here for very long. But that's a little bit about me. That's kind of my background. And I've evolved since, I started as a nutrition coach and went into personal training, and then was certified as an integrative nutrition health coach, and have done advanced training in functional nutrition and metabolism. And I'm just obsessed with all of the things health and fitness.
Yeah. So talk to your entry into the world of bodybuilding. I think is interesting in itself, because you kind of noted a difference between, you were an athlete before, but then you got into bodybuilding, which was kind of like a whole nother animal on its own way. I mean, it's kind of considered an athletic sport, but at the same time, not really. I think it's in a category of its own. But I think it's interesting that your foray into bodybuilding really kind of turned things around in your mind about what fitness is and what it is not. And I think that's interesting, because I've kind of felt the same way. I never got into bodybuilding, but I know people who have gotten into bodybuilding. And while, they go to the gym an awful lot and they work out, and they're pretty hardcore about their workouts and their regimens and all that stuff here. And a lot of them are very smart and knowledgeable, but at the same time, I see a lot of things about them that are not very healthy. I've known people who do bodybuilding who are still smoking. It's just kind of like, really, like they're still like smoking cigarettes regularly. And it's kind of like, how do you not see the contradiction between the life that you're living over here and the life that you're living over there? It's like there's a duality to their personality here, that they've been able to compartmentalize one part of their life from another.
Yeah. No, so I was fortunate that my coach, when I was bodybuilding, she had a very health first approach. So her husband was actually a functional medicine doctor. Mm-hmm. And so I feel very grateful for that. But it's not the healthiest sport. And I tell clients this all the time, because I have a lot of women that come to me and their goal initially is kind of weight loss or fat loss. And, fat loss doesn't always equal health. Like, we can get you there, but there's healthier ways to do it. If we're going to do it. And bodybuilding is a really great example of when it can become unhealthy, not just from a mental perspective, because it's very challenging and it's very regimented. For me in particular, I never had eating disorders, but I definitely started to adapt to like disordered eating patterns. My whole day was planned around food. Like, it was all I thought about. And so, there are those trade-offs, but it really is like, I've seen a lot of research and literature that has like shown, they take bodybuilders and they get their blood work done like right after competition. And a lot of them have terrible numbers. For females specifically, bodybuilding can be very challenging. It can create hormone imbalances and just basically cause your hormones to tank, because we're not meant to live in that kind of, chronic dieting state for that long. So there are definitely, people kind of look at that, and I think, they say, oh, I want to look like that. But the reality is there are consequences too that come with that, especially if you're not doing it in, the healthiest way possible. But yeah, it was definitely interesting for me, because growing up, every sport I played was obviously performance based. So I played basketball, volleyball, I ran track. And so to shift to something that was not about performance and it was about aesthetic, which, arguably can be very subjective, was definitely different for me. But at the time I was like, I just need to laser focus in on something and just shut everything else out.
Right. And I think that's important too. A lot of people do need that. They need a short-term goal to really, and I've used that to myself for myself and for my clients. It's like, hey, I'm still using it. It's like, hey, we can do this obstacle course run that's happens every year. It's fun. I've done it several times. Are you interested? And then, some say yes, some say no, but yeah, it does help a lot. Now, so you've had a life as an athlete and as a bodybuilder, as a bikini fitness competitor as well. Was that true? Okay, so you've been around the block quite a few times here. You're not a novice to this sort of thing here. So, you have the ability. You can approach certain women of maybe a certain age and a certain pedigree and a certain place professionally, and say, you know what? I've been where you at. I've been back and forth quite a few times. I know what you're going through here. So what do you really present to them? I mean, there's a lot of things you can kind of give them here to kind of help them out. But so what do you really say to them and to help them out and kind of pull them out of the rut that they're in?
So it kind of depends. I really like that question, but I find that it always depends on the individual. So my program in general, when I'm working with women, is kind of founded on 4 pillars. So we have our nutrition, we have our movement, our exercise, we have our lifestyle, and then we have our mindset. And of course, kind of within nutrition, we might look at supplementation, other things like that. But anytime I'm either talking with a person, because I'll do discovery calls and consults at first just to kind of get a feel for where someone's at. Are we a good fit? What are they struggling with? And I try to help them bridge that gap between where they're at now versus where they want to be, and kind of paint a picture for them of what that looks like along their journey. And for different people, that's going to look different. For a mom of 3 kids who, just had a baby a year ago, who also works full time, what we're going to do is going to look a little bit different than someone like myself who runs a business, but I don't have kids. So I don't have, that other layer of responsibility at home, or maybe I have other responsibilities. And so when I talk with someone, or when I'm, working with them, we kind of look at what does that journey look like and what is feasible for them. I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make is that they think that, what was feasible for them 10 years ago or back when they were in their early 20s is going to be feasible for them now, both from a physiological perspective and from, just looking at life, right? Like, I don't have the time and the capacity mentally or emotionally to spend, 6 days in the gym training for an hour, but I might have 3 days. Maybe back then I did have 6 days. And so helping people kind of realize that, the plan is better when we can kind of tailor it to what's going to be most feasible for them, as opposed to trying to knock their life totally out of whack so that they can fit what's currently going on into, this plan that really isn't feasible for them. So I try to help people identify what are those big rocks, like where can we get the most amount of movement, what area of, life, or which one of those 4 pillars do we need to focus in on most, and what can we do to kind of support everything else?
Okay, so you don't necessarily incorporate all of them into everyone's plan. They can be cherry picked. Like, say if your client is on top of one, then we'll focus on the other 3.
For sure. And typically they're all kind of incorporated. So for instance, I have a few women right now who they are amazing at going to the gym. Like, that is their me time. That's their outlet. Like, anything, I have to pull them back every now and then just so we're not overdoing it. But the gym is not their challenge. Nutrition might be, though, or having a good bedtime routine, getting sufficient sleep, getting sufficient recovery. So while we're still going to the gym, we're still working on that aspect. The majority of our focus is on, okay, how can we cultivate these new habits in these areas that we're a little bit weaker in? Whereas I have clients who getting to the gym is their biggest struggle, but they really enjoy eating high quality nutritious foods. I don't really have to, do too much work with them on the food front because they kind of have it under lock. Maybe we're just working on maintaining what we're doing there. So I find that most of us have something that we gravitate toward that's a little bit easier, and other areas that are a little bit more challenging. So while we still look at everything, I definitely like to put the emphasis on where do we need to really build up, and where can we just kind of stay in our maintenance mode. Because once something is a habit for someone, it's a lot easier to just say okay, cool, we're already working on that, we're already incorporating that, we're doing great. What do we need to actually spend our conscious effort and energy on building up?
Yeah, right. Now, you mentioned that you do a kind of a transformation call, which you identified, to just kind of put feelers out and see if this is really going to work out or not. I think that's a good idea. So give us an example of someone who would not be ideal.
Well, for starters, somebody who really doesn't have the desire to make the changes necessary. Anybody who's looking for that kind of quick fix, or every now and then I'll get someone, and I'll work with them, but sometimes I'll get people that are like, all right, I'm going on vacation in 4 weeks or 6 weeks, and I want to get in the best shape of my life. And I'm like, do things. And even if
we all run into that.
Yeah. And even if I were to put together something that is going to get you pretty close to where you want to be in 6 weeks, that's not really where the magic happens. And for most people, they're not going to adhere to that anyway. So, those types of things I kind of try to stay away from. And then I do work with women and individuals who have complex health challenges, but every now and then I might find that, something or someone is better suited for someone else. So I had a man recently who I was speaking to, and he is actually an athlete. He's an older individual. He's still very active. I believe he used to play his sport professionally many, many years ago. Has just had a lot of injuries, had a surgery. I can work with that, but that's not really my area of expertise. So in that scenario, he was actually a local person. So it wasn't so much about finding him someone else virtually, but I actually knew someone that I felt just had a better, deeper skill set for exactly what he wanted. And so, I think one thing about being a coach too is really being in integrity with knowing when you're the best option for someone and when you might not be. And sometimes it's just not the right time for individuals too. So, I don't know that there's ever really a right time to make changes, because I think it's anytime we're doing something different or we're shaking things up, it can be a little scary. But sometimes I do have women where I sit down and I talk with them and it's great, but I'm like, I just don't think that you are in a place in life where you're ready to adopt these things. Like I've also had women who I've talked to, and after we have a conversation, I'm like, I really think that you might want to explore something like therapy, or, they have so much mentally and emotionally going on. I'm like, I really think we need to sort that out before we start diving into that. And so, I've pushed people to those modalities as well and said, come back to me in, 1 or 2 months, whenever you're feeling good about, X, Y, Z, and then let's go ahead and start.
Right. And you kind of almost feel like it's an uphill battle too, because you're going against like the quick fix kind of solutions that are all out there and are, they can be to any degree of effectiveness. Some can be somewhat effective, others can just be absolute trash and they're just selling you garbage. So that's a wall I've run up against, because I try making things here that actually are like life transformative, and things that are actually meant to be there for the long haul, versus somebody who just, wants to look good for bikini season coming up or something like that, or, it's just about looks. So has that been a big problem for you, or you just kind of find like you get more of a steady stream of people who are actually serious?
A little bit of both. It's definitely a challenge, and I try to just level set with people. But what I try to educate them on as well is like, and I think you did a great job of mentioning it. Like, some of those things can be effective. Like, we can get, for some people, really great results in a short amount of time. But when I talk with someone and I kind of audit their lifestyle, so to speak, I'm able to kind of tell, like, okay, if we have a ton of stuff to work on and this person is like high stress and crazy busy all the time, the likelihood of them being able to implement 10 different things at one time is pretty slim. So if we need to do 10 different things to get you, this kind of what we might consider quicker results, but you can't implement it, then it doesn't matter because we're not going to get there. So,
right.
But it really is. And I think that social media and the internet in general has been such a wonderful thing for this industry, but it's also been really challenging because it's those marketing headlines. It's like saying like, I'll help you transform your life in, 9 to 12 months is not as sexy as saying like, get ripped in 6 weeks, And so it's just, I feel like we're constantly going up against this sexy marketing headlines that can be very misleading.
So you deliberately in your program, you chose, you call it a 6-month immersion program. Is that right?
Yeah.
Did I have that right? Okay. So it's 6 months, versus like what you just said, like 90 days, which is 3 months. So, in 6 months, how'd you come to that conclusion that 6 months was really like, it was the deal breaker?
I wouldn't necessarily say that it's, that's a hard rule, but I found that that's enough time for us to address. So I get a lot of women, let's say, who have autoimmune disorders, a lot of gut health challenges, potentially hormonal imbalance. So when I'm working with someone, I always like to take a health first approach. So we'll look at all of that. And even if their goal is, hey, I want to lose, 5 pounds of body fat, or I want to look a certain way, I'm always looking at what's going on under the surface first. And if I see that there's some level of dysfunction, that's what we're going to address first. So actually, I've had a client recently who we've been on, I think we're on month 4 now of a pretty extensive gut protocol. She had a lot going on. she's doing really well. But she was making comments like, I'm not losing weight and I don't look different. I'm like, it's because we're not in a weight loss or fat loss phase right now. Like we're literally working on continuing to fix the dysfunction and build a better foundation so that we can achieve those things easier and more sustainably. And so I found that 6 months is, for me, usually kind of a sweet spot of we can typically address the dysfunction and get them where they want to be. But still, because for some people, like mentally 9 months, 12 months, that can seem like a long time. It can seem like a long commitment. So I feel like 6 months for a lot of people is kind of a nice balance of, okay, we can get a lot of things done, but I'm not necessarily committing to a whole year. Now, I do offer the option for clients to continue to extend after 6 months, and we can, either continue working toward a goal, we can pivot, and if they have a different goal that they want to work toward, we'll start shifting to that. And we keep a similar format. But for me, I found that 6 months was kind of that sweet spot of like, okay, you're committing, but it doesn't sound quite as scary as like a whole year of my life.
Right, too. Yeah, you do have to find that kind of that delicate balance of what is long enough that this person can actually change their life and can actually see some results, but isn't so huge that they just get caught up in the timeline of things here. It's like a year, 12 months, that sounds much worse than 6 months, just from a psychological point of view. So it's hard to really know where to really land.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I've had clients in the past where I'm like, I know we could do this in, 3 or 4 months, because I feel like the whole 3 month or 12 week or 90 day, like that time period, that's kind of a big thing in marketing when people are marketing fitness programs and other things. And I mean, we can certainly do things like that. But again, so many of my women are mothers, they're business owners, or they're corporate, executives, and they don't have a lot of time. So, I like to set them up for success because a lot of them, it's not feasible for them to just do an entire lifestyle overhaul in a matter of, 1, 2, or 3 months. And so I find like, obviously I want to set someone up for success as well, both from a physical perspective and a mindset perspective. So giving us a little bit more, it's like when you're on an airplane, you have a little bit bigger airplane. You need a slightly longer runway. So it kind of gives us a longer runway to achieve those goals.
Mm. So I'm curious. So why did you specifically choose like high achieving, high performance, like professional women as your niche versus like, say, like a stay at home mom population, which, might have the same relative income level, but then say if they have 3 kids, but they're all in school for X amount of hours during a day, and they've got this time and they've got this money where they can, shift their life around quite a bit and not have to worry about meeting deadlines, not have to worry about getting on meetings and stuff like that. What made you concentrate on not that, but the professional side of the professional women?
Yeah, that's a great question. And when you spin it like that, I'm like, should I reconsider? No. I came from a corporate background prior to being in health and fitness. And also as I was kind of shifting into the industry, I started out working part-time. I was working as an assistant under my coach, my previous health and fitness coach. And then, kind of shifting into that role. So I think for me, it just seemed like a natural thing because I tend to be very type A as well. I have had to actually really work on that myself as far as like not just being in push mode all the time, constantly trying to chase and achieve the next thing. I also come from a corporate background. And so for me, a lot of the women that I was already having conversations with or kind of the people in my sphere that I was attracting kind of tended to fit that avatar, so to speak. That being said, I am not married to, only working with those people, but I kind of found that was my personality. And that was a lot of who I was attracting as well. I love the aspect though of working with high performing women because they're so driven, but oftentimes the challenge is like helping them pull back from that a little bit. So we're not, becoming counterproductive. Like, I'm a firm believer that if we have a fitness plan and a health plan, whatever it is we're doing, if it's creating a bunch of added stress because we think we have to execute it perfectly or we have to, be at the highest level of performance all the time, which is what a lot of these women think because, that's what they've had to do to get to where they're at in their career or in their life. And so helping them realize that like, we don't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. We don't have to be going 110% all the time to make progress. And we actually sometimes need to slow down and take that edge off a little bit so that we can reap the results of what we're doing. For me, sometimes that's the more challenging aspect of, working with high achievers and high performers.
Right. And you can argue that they might, because of that, they might need it more than the stay-at-home mom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, because their lives are, in a much different way, but are very much high stress, like you said, and just, I think, atypical for anyone in this world, because especially the higher you get up the corporate ladder, the more your responsibilities just increase. And if you have something that kind of offers a reprieve from that, man or woman, it's probably a nice thing.
Absolutely. And it's really rewarding too, to kind of help them fit those things into their lifestyle. Because when you are operating at that level and you have all of those things to do, and this could be said about, someone who's a stay-at-home mom as well, who, maybe their kids aren't in school and they don't have a lot of free time. It's really easy to think, oh, I just don't have time for that, or that's not feasible for me at this point in life. And, like I just mentioned a few minutes ago, like it might not be feasible to do the same thing we were doing 10 years ago. But if we have the right strategy, if we take the time to kind of adapt and find what works and then pivot what doesn't, I think anyone can, make positive changes in their health and in their fitness, regardless of what your external life looks like.
Right. So talk to us. I mean, what's the difference between weight loss and fat loss?
That's a great question. So obviously fat loss, we are losing fat. That's typically what people are going to think of when they say, I want to tone up, right? Like I want to lose fat. I want to build muscle. I have to tell women this all the time. Like when we're toning up, which is what most of my women have goals to do, we're actually building muscle or losing body fat. So that's body recomposition. Sometimes that's associated with weight loss, depending on the individual, and sometimes it's not, depending on how, small someone already is. So, we might need to lose weight, but when you lose weight, it can be water weight. It can be, body fat. It can be muscle tissue too, though. So there is that difference. And, I don't know that and once I sit down and talk with someone and we kind of say, okay, what's weight loss versus fat loss? Yes, we might lose weight in the process. If somebody has a solid amount of weight that they want to lose or need to lose, but more oftentimes than not, it's going to be fat loss specific, because we want to build that muscle, we want to get stronger, we want to create that kind of lean, toned, athletic look. So once I explain that to someone, I've never had someone be like, oh no, I want weight loss over fat loss. Like they're like, oh, okay. Fat loss is really what I'm looking for. And sometimes we end up losing weight in the process, but I've also had women who, weigh 5 or 10 pounds more once we do a body recomposition because they weren't, big to begin with, so to speak. They didn't have a lot of weight that they wanted or needed to lose. And once we start building that muscle mass, they actually weigh, on the scale, they weigh more than what they did before. And so helping women kind of shift out of that mentality too, I think is really important, because I've had people who are very, very averse to seeing that number on the scale go up. And so, I'm always asking them, if you looked and felt the way that you wanted to, would you care about that? And most of the time they're like, I guess not. But it's scary because, a lot of women are kind of trained to think that that is the holy grail of, success when it comes to fitness.
All right. Now the meat of your program here is called the Metabolic Makeover, right? Yeah. So that's a very, very, very all-encompassing sort of program that talks about everything that we've been talking about, or it brings in everything that we've been talking about so far. So dive into that a little bit more. What's that really entail?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I call it a 6-month immersion. And I say immersion because what I desire to do in that program is really dive deep into the coaching relationship with someone. So we're looking at fitness, right. We're looking at nutrition, we're looking at lifestyle habits, and we're looking at mindset. And not just, mindset about, do I have a negative or positive mindset, but what is my mindset with relation to myself, with how I see myself, how I see my body, how I see myself interacting with the world, and what am I not letting go of from my past? And so we kind of look at all of those things, and I like to take my clients kind of on this journey with me. And I always tell them, I am walking basically hand in hand with you down this path. I'm not giving you something and telling you to, come back in a month. I'm, here with you every single step of the way. So it really is very immersive. And we go deep into all of those layers. And as I mentioned before, with more emphasis on, what someone might be struggling with. But we address all of those things. So I've had clients in the past who just want training or they just want this, and that's fine. But I have found for my people in particular, I feel like it's a disservice to them if I don't, give them all of the tools that I have to help them because,
Right.
as you know, exercise is just one part of the puzzle, or nutrition is just one part of the puzzle. And so the more I feel like I'm able to kind of help them assess their life holistically and start implementing those changes on all levels, I feel like the more successful they can be and the more tools that they have that they can take with them after we're done working together and continue to implement that for the rest of their lives. So yeah, my program is called the Metabolic Makeover. 6 months, and we dive into all the things. We go through various phases. We address whatever challenges someone's experiencing, if it's hormone imbalance, if it's gut health. Oftentimes there's some level of dysfunction in kind of all of those, and they're all interconnected. So the great news is when we typically start addressing, one thing, we kind of have that downstream effect of other things start to get better as well.
Right. Well, you really take on a lot there. So you're not only handling someone's body, you're handling their psychology as well. And like you said, you kind of take them hand by hand down this road, almost like a guide. Mm-hmm. And depending on however many clients you might have, you might find that kind of difficult to do for everybody because everyone's going to have their different needs, their different struggles. They're going to have, a point where, they're really kind of got mired in one thing or another and they are looking for you to help them out. Or is it just the opposite? Is it more or less because you've kind of dialed in your niche so much? Is it just more or less, well, I know what they typically struggle. I know where they typically struggle. I know what to do when they get to this point. Or, is it kind of like, you have to react to things as they come along?
A little bit of both. I have found that there's a lot of overlapping struggles, whether it's, from a mindset perspective or just physical challenges that we're experiencing. So there's definitely some of that. And, as you are tuned into that more and as you work with that more, it becomes a little bit easier and a little more second nature to kind of troubleshoot those things when they happen. But I do also keep my roster pretty small compared to some coaches for that exact purpose, because I have some clients I talk to every day. I was talking to 2 of them before I got on this call, and it's Sunday as we're recording this. And so, I try to offer as much support as I can to my women and the few men that I have. And so, yeah, I do try to pride myself on keeping, my roster capped where I feel like it's feasible, because the minute that I start feeling like I'm a little overwhelmed or I have a lot on my plate or I bit off more than I could chew, that's when I start to say, okay, I want to make sure that the people I have in this program are experiencing the best results, experiencing the best support that they can while they're here. And so it's a little bit of both of those things, though.
Yeah. How often or how much of it is really kind of working alongside your clients as family too? Because I found that that's kind of a hard, I found that in my own practice too, because if you can be there to support them, but if they have to go home every day to something that is not a supportive environment, you're going to lose out because you just are. You're not in that house.
Yeah. 100%. I will say I don't have direct conversations with my clients, spouses or family members very frequently. I do have a husband and wife that I work with, like separately, but together. They both work with me, and that's been really, really rewarding and really great. But yeah, it really is. I talk with my clients about this all the time. Your environment is going to impact you so much, whether it's, what food you're choosing to keep in your house, or how supportive is your family? Are they constantly trying to tear you down? I definitely have clients who have parents who are not supportive, or partners who aren't not supportive, but aren't really doing what's necessary to kind of help them make the necessary shifts that they desire to make. And so, that's
like what?
So for instance, I have clients that I recommend giving up alcohol for a specific duration while we're really focusing on a health specific challenge. And let's say their partner refuses to either give up alcohol, or is like, well, let's just drink on the weekends. So, kind of tries to talk them back into it. But then, the issue can become, okay, well, we're only having drinks on the weekends. And I'm not, someone who cuts things out for my clients all the time. But, we go through these phases where I know that it's going to be most advantageous for them based on what their goal is and what the timeline is that we have to achieve that. And so I've had that happen where it's just really difficult when you're used to going out for drinks with your partner or your spouse on the weekend, and they really aren't open to saying, hey, like what else can we do? Is there something else that we can do together that doesn't revolve around going to a bar, or that doesn't revolve around, having drinks? And so I've had that. I've had clients who really struggle with, well, I don't like eating this type of food. I want to eat healthier, more nutritious stuff, but my husband, won't eat a green to save his life, or, I have to cook totally separate meals or things like that. And so I try to help them navigate that and say, okay, how can we, you have to do what you have to do, but how can we make it the most supportive for you? And sometimes their partners or spouses, whomever, family members are open to changing or kind of, just adopting things that they're doing. And other times, not so much. I have a client right now who her husband packs her pill box with all her supplements every morning. And so it's so cute because it's like, she's so busy that she is like, I feel like I won't do it. But he does it for me. So like, that's an example of, he's super supportive, very helpful, like literally helping her implement the things because he really wants to see her succeed. But, it can be challenging. I've also had clients who, are very close with, let's say, their parents, but maybe their parents aren't super supportive and just don't have a very healthy lifestyle themselves. And so we're constantly, encouraging my clients to kind of step outside of the, behaviors that we're trying to get them to adopt just so they can kind of do what everybody else is doing. And I'm sure you've probably run into that too. Not when we start to make positive changes in life, not everyone is going to understand it and not everyone is going to like it. And so, having that kind of that boundary, and sometimes for me with clients, it's really helping them set boundaries with their family, with their friends, because most of them want to change. They want to implement the things that we're doing, but they struggle when the environment isn't really conducive to doing that.
Yeah, I've not often had someone who expressed to me like, my significant other or my parents or whatever, my friends, they're not very supportive of me, or they are like, they're fighting me every inch of the way. But I've had people who just kind of dropped out for no reason. Mm-hmm. And, you can make it that whatever, you can make it that what you will. There can be all kinds of reasons why people just kind of abscond like that. But I think probably I had a big part of it. The spouse just didn't like it, or the girlfriend or boyfriend just didn't like it. And so, the heat was on every single time. And so just making changes. And I can totally see that because I've made changes in my own life. And, I've had people around me who didn't understand what I was doing, or didn't see the purpose or utility. And I encounter that to a certain degree of people saying like, you're going too hard. You're doing too much. You're doing this, you're doing that. And, it's not a point of being malicious. It's a point of concern. I get that. But, it's, I know when I'm doing too much. I know what my boundaries are, or, I know what my boundaries at least were. And I can feel like when the strain is getting too much, and I know how to back off a little bit. Mm-hmm. So I have that kind of emotional intelligence. Not everyone does, but thankfully I do. So I appreciate your concern, but still, leave me alone, that kind of thing,
Oh, yeah. If I had $1 for every time I had a friend that was like, you need to take a day off, which granted, sometimes I do need to take a day off, but I'm like,
right.
I know when I'm hitting that point of, really, really needing that. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that kind of brings us into another area of fitness here. So we know about the social media. We know about how, the aesthetics tends to dominate everything because we're visual creatures, and we make judgments based on things that we see. That's our primary sensory as humans. But now we've gotten into this point here where the hustle and grind of fitness is really getting popular. Mm-hmm. So you have like the the David Goggins.
Yeah.
And I've made, I'm going to make it clear, I have nothing against David Goggins. I mentioned him a couple times in a couple episodes, and I don't want to sound like I'm anti David Goggins. But, his influence, and together with others, like, we have these people who worked one time or another with elite athletes, professional level athletes. And now they're out there writing books, starting podcasts, starting YouTube channels, and they're taking what they did with these people who are a very small segment of the human population. And then now they're trying to use that and apply that to average people. And I can see the allure of it, and I can see even the utility of it, but I don't think that it's a perfect match. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. No, I think that you stated that beautifully. I think that a lot of people, average people in our society can benefit from cultivating, more discipline and getting that kind of swift kick in the butt, so to speak. But I'll use myself as an example. I have done, I'm sure you're familiar with the 75 hard challenge. Have you heard?
I might have. I can't think of it right now.
Okay, gotcha. So it is a challenge from Andy Frisella. It's a great challenge. And it's
right.
It's more about cultivating habits and disciplines throughout the day. So again, another person who's kind of very vocal in that space. And it's not a weight loss plan. It's not anything like that. It's about, you do 2 45-minute workouts a day. One is outside. You drink a gallon of water a day. You follow some sort of nutrition plan. You read 10 pages of a book, things like that. So, it's really about cultivating those habits and that discipline to do the difficult things every day. And I can tell you that I've done that challenge before and it was amazing. I felt great about cultivating that discipline, but I didn't personally feel great doing 2 intense workouts a day. So I had to kind of scale that to what was good for me. And that's something, this being a very basic example, he talks about, scaling it to what is feasible for you. But some people will hear that and be like, oh, I got to go do cardio every single day. I'm going to go hit the gym and lift, go do intense weightlifting every single day. And so understanding that you can cultivate more discipline in your life, and a lot of people need that, but a lot of us don't have the capability, whether it's from a physical perspective, or, maybe we just have a ton of responsibilities in life. I don't have the same responsibilities that somebody with 3 kids has. I took care of 2 parents that had cancer. So at that point in my life, when I was doing that, my ability to show up and do something like that was not necessarily there. And so, knowing when we need to cultivate more discipline and it is beneficial to push ourselves, but also understanding that there is a time to back off, and life has different seasons, just like we go through different seasons of exercise and nutrition. Our life is not always going to look the same. And so I think for a lot of people, women in particular, because I do see women who undereat, overtrain, have tanked their hormones, feel like crap every day, are tired. And that's not somebody that needs to go out and do 2 workouts a day or doesn't need to go do whatever intense, crazy thing that somebody is pushing. Now they might need to cultivate discipline in another area. And as I mentioned before, sometimes that discipline is knowing when to actually pull back and refraining from continuing to push.
You're right.
And so, yeah, I do think there's a certain segment of the population that could benefit from having more discipline. But I do think that, taking those things, an elite athlete, when you're getting paid to do that and that is your life and you're putting all of your time and energy into becoming the best at that, that's
right.
a lot different.
Exactly.
Than those, people who work 8 or 9 hours a day, have 2 kids, don't have that luxury of that being their life. And so for people to kind of understand, okay, how can I maybe take that message and use it to motivate myself? But I don't need to be at that level, or that's not going to really serve me in the long term.
Yeah. Fitness is not a zero-sum game. It's not an all or nothing at all kind of situation. So I think if you probably take that more moderated approach to it, and maybe that's just kind of hard for the people that you work with mostly anyway, because they're such type A, they're such alphas, and they didn't get where they got by slacking or having a lack of discipline. Clearly they do. You couldn't get that CEO position. You couldn't start that company or, build whatever from the ground up just by, being undisciplined and just doing things in a haphazard sort of way. So, I can see how to those people that this message, this hard driven message, can really resonate with them. But at the same time, there's other things you have to consider too. Like, how similar is David Goggins' life to yours?
Exactly.
The fact that he can go out there and the fact that he can go out there and do these things and live this way, which I think it's open debate whether he actually does live that way every single 24/7 or if it's just marketing. It's probably a little combination of the two, but I think this is really going against the grain here too, because we're battling against everyone who's trying to sell, the hard driving message and the quick fix.
Absolutely. And I think too, for people, what's really important is you can look at what other people are doing. You can take that message if that resonates with you. But I think so many people in fitness or in their fitness journey are so focused outwardly on what everyone else is doing. So I find when we can bring that focus back to what do I need to do in my life? What feels good for me? What is feasible? What is my goal? What's actually going to help me get to that goal? Because a lot of times you don't need to do those, super, like you said, it's not a zero-sum game. And so anytime that we're making small steps forward, those are still positive steps and we're still moving in the right direction. And I think that, for a lot of people, not focusing so much on what's going on out there, not listening to those marketing messages and just really turning that focus back to themselves and what they want, what they need to do, and having the guidance of someone that can kind of pave that way for them, I think is going to be more beneficial in the long run than, trying to be all or nothing or go 0 to 100 every single day.
Right. So the issue of body positivity has gotten big. I think really just within the last few years, it's really kind of accelerated, maybe as a reaction to everything we just talked about. So the idea of, having a positive attitude towards your appearance, which on the surface sounds like a great idea. Mm-hmm. I'm totally behind that. Right. But then is it, I'm trying to figure out how I can phrase this too. So it is a touchy subject too, and I'm not against it. I think it's a great idea. But then you have people who come to you because they want to lose the weight, they want to lose the fat, they want to tone up. They probably see your background in bodybuilding and as a bikini competitor and saying, "Oh, she's perfect for me. That's the direction I want to go." And we have this idea that, if I look good, then I feel good. What you look like on the outside will translate to how you feel on the inside. But a part of me also thinks, isn't that kind of self-defeating? Because if everything how you feel on the outside, and I've met some people who, are not necessarily in great shape, but they don't dog themselves, they know they have other strengths and they're pretty confident people. So if everything to how you feel about yourself is based on how you look in your reflection, then I can't see that as being a great thing.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great way to put it. How I look at it is, again, I'm like, how do I word this now? For anyone listening, if you think that having a certain physique or looking a certain way or weighing a certain amount of weight is going to make you happy or fulfilled or worthy or is just going to enhance your life in whatever way, you're wrong. I will tell you that from personal experience. Having six-pack abs, being in, what we might think of as amazing shape, looking like a fitness model is not going to make you happy if there's inner work to be done. Now, that being said, on the flip side, sitting there and saying like, I'm fine the way I am, I'm perfect, all of that, while you don't genuinely feel your best and just continuing to allow yourself to perpetuate whatever it is that you're doing that's gotten you to this place of feeling, not great, whether it's physically, mentally, emotionally, that's also not, in my opinion, kind of a form of self-love or body positivity. So I think one thing that I try to communicate to women is that it's okay to want to change something with your body, whether it's your health, whether it is the way that you look, and still love yourself at the same time. So for me, self-love is less about taking myself out to get a pedicure or giving myself a hug. Like, that's all just super woo-woo fluff stuff. It's for me more about appreciating and respecting my body and what it does for me every day, regardless of what it looks like, regardless of if it looks like a bodybuilder or if, I'm the heaviest and most out of shape that I've ever been. And also accepting, myself inside and out for everything that I am. Now, I have been in many situations in life where I wanted to change things about myself, whether it was physically or whether it was like, man, I keep perpetuating these self-sabotaging or negative patterns in my life or in my relationships, XYZ. Why am I doing that? I don't like that I do this. I need to change this. And that's okay. I accept that part of myself. I respect myself the same way that I respect you and I respect anyone that I encounter. And I still desire to change that, like whatever it is. And so that's okay. You don't have to sit there and say affirmations about I'm perfect the way that I am. You don't need to look a certain way. You don't need to act a certain way in order to be worthy of whatever it is that you want. But if you're unhappy with your life, you're unhappy with the way you feel, or things about yourself, you can change those. And I think that like self-love too, sometimes is doing the hard thing. It's having the discipline to do whatever actions are going to get you to that goal and not just living in this instant gratification world that we're so in tune with now, but also not continuing to beat yourself down or create this vision of yourself that you think you need to do based on what society has told you. So for me, it's finding that balance of like, who do I really want to be? How do I want to show up in the world? How do I want to feel? Like, this is my life. No one else can live it for me. And when, I'm hopefully very long time from now, looking back and saying, wow, I don't have much time left. I have to be happy with myself. I have to be happy with the choices that I made, with the way that I feel, and no one else is going to do that for me. So I think having that balance of like knowing what you want out of life and who you want to be and how you want to feel, and then working on creating that for yourself and not letting someone else dictate what that looks like for you, whether that's externally or internally.
Right. But then again, it's a lot easier said than done, isn't it? Because we're always influenced by what's around us.
I tell clients all the time, it's a lifelong journey. I say these things, I practice these things, and that's what I practice. That's the word, right? Like, it's a lifelong practice. We're going to be bombarded by these things. We're going to, second guess what we're doing. And what I want right now in life and how I want to be and how I want to look and how I want to show up can look different. I can change my mind in 5 years. That's okay. We're dynamic beings. This is a journey. Life is a journey. There's never an end point. And oftentimes, as we grow, what we see and what our vision is of what that looks like changes too. And that's okay.
Yeah, exactly right. So Allie, as we're going to start to wind down now, and I think you already kind of touched upon what could be a good sign off for you here. But I also, as a closing tradition, I like to get, because we talk about a whole lot in almost an hour that we've been here. So I like to kind of get like a final word from the guest. So if people could listen or people could walk away with one thing to bear in mind and one thing only, what would you say it would be?
That is a great question. I would say if there's one thing that you can take away, it's to choose you. Make yourself a priority in your own life. And I say that because I see this a lot with my clientele and with women in general, is that we put everything and everyone else above ourselves. Make yourself a priority in your own life. And I guarantee you, whatever it is that you want to achieve, whether it's with your health and fitness or anything else in other areas, is going to start to manifest and is going to become a lot easier once you have added yourself to your priority list. So if you're not already making yourself a priority, please start doing that today.
There you go. No better way of saying it. All right. Well, Allie Cass, thanks so much for showing up.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Sean.
Not a problem. And everyone who's listening, again, this is the Fitness Reborn podcast. My name is Sean from Renaissance Fitness Personal Training. I will put the social media for Allie and her website on the show notes, as always. And you can also get a hold of me, too. You can reach me at my email address is renfitnesswarriors@gmail.com. And if you, of course, find value in this episode or in this show, please consider going to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and adding a review. it helps more than you know. It really helps increase the visibility of the show. Don't forget, now you can also sponsor the show. There's a link in there. You can sponsor the show. You can, you have choices of how much money you want to add per month. There's no strings attached. You can cancel anytime. Go in there, check that out. And again, Allie, thanks very much for showing up on your Sunday.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Not a problem. All right. Until next time, see you guys later. Move forever. Peace.